I had an unusual constitution after suffering from a severe fever when I was young. It's not something else. It's a symbol of a man. It's grown in size. Like and subscribe, please. It seems to be more than twice the average size. When I had a fever, the doctor said he didn't know the name of the disease. I was told that I had been in a bad mood for about 2 weeks and then came back to life. My friends heard the rumor and asked me to go to the bath with them. I went to the bath with my close friends a few times, and the rumor that I had a big thing spread quickly. There was an opportunity for me to change from a passive personality to a bold personality as an adult. I had a girlfriend for the first time and had sex for the first time. It wasn't her first time, but she said it was too painful. She even shed tears, saying she was sick to death. I asked her, "Shall I quit?" But her girlfriend told me not to. I was so confused that I didn't know what to do. She was very nice to me that day, and she seemed to want me to tell her we should go to the hotel on a date. I've been to a few entertainment establishments with my friends, and I've also been to an establishment with foreign women. My partner was a white woman, and I didn't want to go. But she offered me a suggestion first after noticing my stuff, with a natural touch. She said she wanted to go to the second round with me. I had no reason to refuse. She was also very sick. After that, she suggested to me that we meet again, and we met a few more times. I kept getting in touch with her, so I met her from time to time for a while, and my relationship with her fell apart. I'm not that tall and handsome, so I didn't make it easy to make a girlfriend, but all the women who slept with me were nice to me. I definitely got a call from them after they broke up after dating. I was puzzled by this. When I got to work and I thought I should get married, there were people among my acquaintances who wanted to introduce me to a woman. She's a woman with only her mother, and her mother says she has some wealth. Her mother had no husband. Would a rich woman be interested in me? I thought, and I turned down the offer in good words. But I was offered to keep seeing her. So I was introduced to her, and I liked her, and so did she. We developed into a good relationship, and finally we talked about the future. I met her mother, and she told her mother that she really wanted to marry me. Maybe she liked spending the night with me. I also wanted to marry my wife. When I first greeted her, my elegant mother-in-law treated me so kindly. There was also an expectation that if I lived with my wife, who is an only child, I would have a mother-in-law like a really caring mother. My mother is a typical lady who is talking and has a strong personality. Contrary to my mother-in-law is quiet and laughs loudly when I say something. I was attracted to her and felt grateful. I married my wife and lived near my mother-in-law's house. My mother-in-law made the house for me. My parents gave her a big thank you. I'm married and living with my wife on a honeymoon. And I got some shocking news. When I went to the local hair salon to cut my hair, I heard the hairdresser and the local lady talking, and I was so shocked by their conversation. It was that my mother-in-law was a barmaid. The hairdresser was talking excitedly without knowing that I was her son-in-law. You know that woman who lives in the back of that building. Yes, that was the house where my mother-in-law lived alone. The hairdresser said she saw her mother-in-law hanging out with a man in a bar. I thought my mother-in-law was hanging out with her friends, but it wasn't true. The hairdresser said she saw my mother-in-law enter a hotel with a man. The hairdresser said my mother-in-law called the man honey, but he was too young. The hairdresser said they must have met for the first time. I was confused, but the story was not confirmed, so I couldn't tell anyone. I failed to have a marital relationship with my wife on my honeymoon. It was because she was so sick, but she gradually adjusted to my size and said she was happy to spend the night with me. My wife told her mom about her failure on her honeymoon. My wife has been living alone with her mother since she was young and talked a lot to each other. That's why I think my wife was able to tell her mom that too. My wife is late, so it was hard for me to have a relationship with her anymore. She told me to put up with her until she gave birth and recuperated. I'm honestly a person who can't hold back my simmering desires. I got married and enjoyed every day and had a hot time with my wife every day, so I think it was harder to endure it. One day, I drank with my colleagues at work. The manager told me to follow him because he had somewhere to go with him. The manager was drunk, and I helped him into the room. After a while, two women came and I was so surprised. One of them was my mother-in-law. Looking at my mother-in-law, who was frozen at me, I quickly said, "Director, are you okay?" My mother-in-law, who noticed my relationship with him, had no choice but to ignore me. The manager said to me, "I like this little girl." The strong smell of cosmetics. My mother-in-law has never smelled like this, and the manager was going to pay. So my mother-in-law and I were also going to go to the second round. To me, who was hesitating, the manager said, "If you're going to go, let's go together, isn't it?" The manager said he would pay for it. "But you won't go?" At that time, my mother-in-law came forward and replied, "If the manager tells me to go, I'll go." We went to the hotel. The manager told me to have a good time as I went into his room. I asked, "Mom, what's going on here?" My mother-in-law said, "Go in and talk to me," and quickly grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the room. My mother-in-law said something amazing. She said she was afraid to meet a man, even though she was so lonely after her bereavement to her husband. When I met him, he said he seemed to covet his mother-in-law's property. Even if it wasn't the beginning, the man who found out about his mother-in-law's property was greedy. So she became increasingly afraid to meet men. But she was so lonely that she was forced to do this. She told her boss that she wanted to deal with young men because she could get some money. Among the young men she met, surprisingly, there were many cases where she asked to call an older woman because it was okay to be old like her mother. I'm a woman too. I'm a woman who misses men. Can you understand me? I nodded silently to my mother-in-law's sad expression. I explained to my mother-in-law that I was forced to come to karaoke because the manager dragged me. My mother-in-law made me feel at ease by telling me that there are times when men can't help themselves in social life, and that she understands everything. I said to my mother-in-law, "I'll take you there." I said, "Get up." And my mother-in-law was looking at me with a longing look. After facing each other's eyes for a long time, we slowly fell to the bed. I had a hot time, and like other women, she seemed to find me too much. When I finished the act, I honestly confessed to my mother-in-law I was dissatisfied with my wife's full term, but I didn't expect you to be satisfied. She kept looking surprised even when she was listening to me. I noticed what size your stuff was when I was singing the blues at karaoke earlier, but I asked her if I was sick and she said she was sick and good. When I asked if you knew that only half of my stuff was in it, your mother-in-law opened her eyes wide and said, "That, did you?" She said in a trembling voice. She said she also felt sorry for her daughter for making her husband feel lonely, so he allowed her to solve it any time in the future. I thought to myself, my mother-in-law pretending to be for me. In fact, she wants pleasure. I pretended not to know and said this. "Really? Can I do that? Aren't you going to have a hard time?" My mother-in-law said, "What can I do even if it's hard? I don't want you to be hard. I don't want my son-in-law to cheat. This is all for my daughter and you." After 2 more jobs, we came out of the motel, and I drove my mother-in-law home. She has since texted me several times a day. "Did you have lunch? I'll take it easy so I won't get hurt." I've called her occasionally after our wedding, but she never contacted me first. But the fact that she texted me so often meant she wanted something from me, didn't she? A few days later, my wife informed me she would stay with her. She told me she would stay with her, but I refused her offer. I told her I would go home late after drinking because we have a lot of drinks, and it would be a nuisance for her. But that was just an excuse. I stopped by my mother-in-law's on the way home from work to see my wife and have lived back home. She visits us almost every day on the pretext of bringing us some side dishes. Side dishes were allowed when I stopped by her house. My mother-in-law put on makeup and dressed up when she came over to bring me side dishes. I kept pretending I didn't know, and eventually she asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm tired, but I can't help it. I can't cheat on you." When she heard me, she turned red and said, "Why didn't you tell me? You're going to cheat on me." She grabbed my wrist and took me to bed. Since that day, she has visited my house almost every day. She said, "Mom, aren't you tired? You're going to have a hard time dealing with me," she replied. "No, I can't make him cheat." While my wife gave birth and was in a postpartum care center, I stayed with my mother-in-law at her home. We were a couple. My mother-in-law, who provided me with health care every day. She went to the care center during the day with her wife. Then after I left work, she set up a diet and waited for me. Even after she gave birth and recuperated, my mother-in-law gently told me what she wanted. Whenever I was asked, "Are you all right now?" and "Yes," I purposely answered briefly. She said, "Men can't be satisfied with one woman," and she was slurring her words. Eventually, she clung to me and I hugged her. She sends me supportive texts every day. She tells me to visit her every other day to pick up the food. Every time I visit her, we spend about 2 hours together and then return home. My mother-in-law has adapted to me to the point where everything I have can fit in. My mother-in-law sometimes calls me honey and shakes her head when she's with me. I never thought my elegant mother-in-law would become such a manipulative woman. My mother-in-law tells us to quit work whenever we have a hard time. She says she can give us living expenses. I don't seem to get too stressed out at work because I have a strong background.